Hey, what's up everybody? This is Osterberg501 and today I want to go over a Graveborn and Spellshot build focused on buffing up your weapons as much as possible. Now just a disclaimer, this will be using the broken way of using the Buff Meister legendary spell. So if you don't want to use a build that uses this in its current form because of how powerful it is, this may not be the build for you, but I will be having pretty much this exact same build without using the Buff Meister in its broken form, and that will probably be coming out in the next few days as well. So first off, for our skills and passives, we're using Ambidextrous so we can use 2 spells. Then we're primarily going into the Spellshot tree, and for the class feat for our Spellshot, we have Spellweaving. When we cast a spell or reload, we gain Spellweaving stacks. These Spellweaving stacks give us spell damage increase. The last 10 seconds stacks up 5 times. Then we're going 5 points into reload speed. This is pretty massive because we do drain our magazines pretty quickly. We're going 3 points into magic bullets. So a portion of all of our spell damage increase is also giving us damage increases to our guns, which synergizes well with a lot of our other build, spell weaving, our weapons, stuff like that. 1 point into mage armor. So every time we gain a spell weaving, we gain 10% of our ward. This just allows us to be much more tanky. And also with glass cannon that we're also taking, this is the only way we're regenning our ward. Then we have glass cannon. We can't regen our ward normally, but we gain 30% spell damage, and like I mentioned, we can still regenerate our ward with mage armor. Then 5 points into just warming up. We gain 4% fire rate increase for every stack of spell weaving, so just pretty big increases to our fire rate. Then we have 1 point into high thread count, increases our spell weaving stacks by 3, so the max stacks is 5 normally, so now we can have 8 stacks. Then we have 5 points into imbued weapon. Whenever you cast a spell, your guns deal bonus damage of that spell's element for a duration, and this stacks for each spell, so we have 2 stacks. This gives us 10% bonus damage for 8 seconds, stacked up twice. Then we did 1 point into 1 slot, 1 kill, and this will allow us to gain increased gun damage for every stack of spell weaving. So that's 8 stacks, 4% gun damage per stack. Then we put 3 points into Warcaster. Now this is a kill skill, and whenever we kill an enemy, we have a chance to reload our weapon. This is primarily to get our capstone, but it will definitely help us when running through chaos chambers and just killing trash enemies. Then for our capstone, which is very, very strong for this build, gun and critical hits have a chance to instantly reset all spell cooldowns. It's a 15% chance, and this effect has a 5-second cooldown, but this makes us not have to go into any spell cooldown. With how fast we shoot, how many crits we get, our spells are constantly being reset. So we don't have to put any other points, any hero points, anything like that into spell cooldown. Then for our Graveborn tree, our class feat is Demi-Lich Companion. We have a Demi-Lich that deals dark magic damage to enemies. Anytime we cast a spell, the Demi-Lich will then cast a Hellish Blast spell of that spell's element that just tracks enemies, blows up, does AoE damage, and all of our damage increases also apply to our Demi-Lich Companion. So our Demi-Lich is also dealing quite a bit of damage because of how much damage buffs we're getting. Then we're going 5 points in Immortal Vessel, maximum health increase, and dark magic efficiency increase. A lot of our damage is dark magic. Then 5 points in a Dark Pact, 20% dark magic damage increase. Then we have Stain of the Soul. All of our spells deal 20% bonus dark magic damage, so that's a bonus on top. So if we had a spell that dealt fire damage, it will then deal an additional 20% as dark magic damage. Then 1 point into Dread Covenant, make some of our damage redirect to our Demi-Lich, so just gives us damage reduction. Then instead of us dying, it sacrifices our Demi-Lich, gives us a bunch of health back, and that has a 120-second cooldown. Then 1 point into punishment, so our Demi-Lich's Hellish Blast now have a chance to double cast, 20% chance to do that, and our Demi-Lich's Hellish Blast actually deal a big chunk of damage. When our buffs are up, our Demi-Lich could just one-shot enemies with this, so it does a ton of damage. Then I put 1 point into Ascension. It's a kill skill, gives us maximum health and spell damage increases, 2% per stack, has 10 stacks, so that's 20%, and this is pretty easy to say stack because it has a duration of 30 seconds. So just 1 point into this is pretty strong, especially when you're doing your runs chaos chambers. You can keep this up pretty much 100% of the time. Then for our hero points, we maxed out in dexterity for crit chance increases, we max out strength for crit damage increases, and then I put the rest of my points into constitution, which gives max health and ward increases. And the reason I did this is to just make it more enjoyable generally playing the game. Wonderlands I think is quite a bit unbalanced in terms of how bursty it is, especially when you get any element applied to you. Status effects just destroy you pretty quickly. Even with really high damage builds where you're destroying all the enemies pretty quickly, you still get downed quite a bit. So I just want to go more into survivability, so it would generally be more enjoyable to play. This build already has enough damage to destroy anything pretty quickly, so more survivability is going to be good. Now, if you don't want the more survivability, you don't care about that, you can just take these points and put it into wisdom for status damage increases. This is the only other thing that's pretty much going to affect our build. We don't really get effects by skill cooldown or spell cooldown because of how much we reset our spells. So if you want more damage, go into wisdom. You want more survivability, go constitution. And for myth ranks, you just go into whatever is going to help the build. For arcade, you can max out intelligence. You can go spell damage, spell crit, whatever you want. I would mainly probably go spell damage after getting max into intelligence. Blade master, I would go strength, constitution, then go into dark magic damage, then pass that. It's all melee attack, so it's not really going to affect our build. For Deadeye, go 10 into dexterity. Then I've been going into fire rate, so max out fire rate. Then you could do pretty much whatever you want. Gun damage at the end is always going to be good, but that's the infinite stacking one. Reload speed is good. Magazine size is also good. Then for druid, I went max into loot luck just for better loot. Then you don't really have a ton of stuff. I'm going to start maxing out wisdom and attunement just to get those. But past that, you could go into companion damage if you want, because your companion does deal some decent damage. Then for our items, like I mentioned, this is a buff master build, so I am using a dark magic element buffmeister. If you don't know what's broken about this spell just buffs all of your direct damage when you use it. So anything that does direct damage to an enemy that's not a status effect gets a base damage increase, but this is broken right now with ambihextrous. So instead of taking the 168 buff off of the buffmeister spell like it should right here, it's taking the buff from our main spell and taking that damage. So instead of our base damage being buffed by 168, it's being buffed by 3,941 because that's what the damage of my spell is. So for this specific build, Buffmeister is incredibly important. Then the highest damage spell you can get, and make sure it's not a pellet spell. Make sure it's all in one damage amount. Don't have a 200 times 12 spell. That's only going to buff it by 200. And you can get spells a lot higher damage than this one I have. I think I've seen over 5,000 damage spells. I just haven't been lucky enough to get one. And it doesn't really matter what your main spell is, just get the highest damage possible. Then for our weapons, mainly I'm using the Queen's Call. This thing is incredibly strong. It shoots 3 shots baseline. I have a ×2, so it shoots 12 pellets at a time. Really high damage off that. And then every crit has a chance to call down a Frost Meteor that also does another pretty good chunk of damage that's also buffed off of all of our different spells. So this is doing a ton of damage. Now the only thing that I'm going to try to look into is dark magic weapons. I really haven't found any really good dark magic weapons, but they just buffed the scaling for dark magic weapons, and this build is primarily focused on dark magic damage. So if I could get that, there may be a better weapon out there. I'm just not sure what that would be, and this weapon is incredibly strong anyway. Then for AoE damage, I'm using live wires. Pretty much what this does, every single shot has a chance to arc lightning to enemies, and with how fast it shoots, it's pretty much arcing this damage to all enemies, and this arced damage will also apply any additional bonuses on top. It'll get buffed by our Buffmeister, so you're able to just AoE damage all enemies in an area for a ton of damage. Very good for AoE clearing, and then pretty much anything else, I'm using the Queen's Call. Then for our rings, I really don't have that good of rings. I mainly just look for rings with gun damage as their main, and then if you can get legendaries that have some decent stats on them with the legendary effect that you can keep up most of the time, that could be good. Like this one right here, dealing damage to a boss increases the effects by 100%, and the effects are just the secondary stats on these. So my rings aren't that great, but I did get gun damage, so good gun damage rolls. Then for a shield, I mainly went for a shield that's just as tanky as possible. This one has high capacity, good maximum health increases. That's all I'm mainly going for. If you're not having as much of an issue with surviving, you can go for a different shield that maybe gives you some damage buffs, but I just want to be more tanky because the game's so bursty. Then for our armor piece, I'm going with this legendary armor piece that converts 30% of all of our damage dealt to dark magic damage, and dark magic efficiency is increased by 30%. So this synergizes with a lot of our other abilities, and this is also why I want a weapon that deals dark magic damage, so I can pretty much turn all of our damage into dark magic damage and just scale it even harder. But this is still a pretty decent roll. My increases to my passives aren't very good on this, but Graveborn and Spellshot power, spell damage increase, all damage dealt increase, and maximum health, so a decently rolled armor piece. Then for our necklace, pretty much the only thing on this necklace that I'm really using is dark magic damage and Spellshot power, because they got pretty good rolls on that. Status effect damage and chance can help a bit. You do a decent bit of damage with your status effects, but this is probably one of my worst pieces of this build. I really haven't found any other good necklaces. Then for our enchantments, on our primary weapon, we have on spellcast, increase elemental damage. So this is going to be up a majority of the time, just 20% increase to pretty much all of our damage. We don't really have a good roll on our live wire. I need to get a new one of these, but the main thing I am using is Queen's Call. On our melee weapon, on spellcast, increases dark magic damage. Now these do stack. If you don't know how enchants work, you can't stack two of the same elements. So if I had another enchanted that on spellcast increases dark magic damage, that wouldn't stack. But this one that does a specific dark magic damage, and this one that does all elemental damage will stack. Then our Buffmeister, we have on spellcast increases gun damage, so another big buff. Then we have on spellcast increases all damage, so again another big buff. And on our shield, and the enchant on our shield doesn't do anything because it's the same exact one as on our main weapon. I need to re-roll this, but again, I need to go find a better shield and also get a better enchant on that. So there's still a good chunk of power left to farm up through different items for this build. So that's pretty much the entirety of this build. It's a pretty simple build to use. You pretty much just spam out your spells as much as possible. Anytime they're up, you want to keep Buffmeister up on yourself as much as possible. Then you're just primarily getting all of your damage from your guns. Everything is going to be focused to buffing your weapons, and your weapons are going to be doing a massive amount of damage. So that's the entirety of this build. So subscribe if you want to see more Wonderlands or other videos. Leave a like if you liked the video. Leave a comment down below what you guys think about this build, and thanks for watching.
Drop the ball. How swift they fall. Justice has been served. At the ready. Catastrophe at my command! Time for a spell! I shall uphold my oath. Yes, I'll return you to your tomb when our contract is done.